to all of you. It is my immense pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Hisar branch and Sonipat branch in today's webinar on Code of Ethics. I welcome you, sir. See you, Sajanji. I welcome all this today. After a long time, we have crossed 100 participants. It's after election. This is our first webinar, and we have crossed 100 participants. Now let's hope the program goes also wonderful like this. Over to you, Saraj ji.
Thank you, Bharat ji. मैं सोनभद्र ब्रांच एंड हिसार ब्रांच एंड ऑल पार्ट्स ऑफ द इंडिया जो मेंबर्स हमारे साथ ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं, मैं सभी का स्वागत करता हूं हमारे आज के वेबिनार कोड ऑफ एथिक्स पे। और जो हमारे आज के स्पीकर हैं सीवी साजन सर, आपका सर बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर, आपने हमारा इनविटेशन एक्सेप्ट करा और आप सर आए, उसके लिए आपका स्वागत सर, वेबिनार एक्सेप्ट करा। एंड मैं सभी पार्ट ऑफ द इंडिया के मेंबर्स का भी धन्यवाद करता हूँ कि उन्होंने मेरे पास काफी जगह से कॉल्स आ रहे थे, कोलकाता एंड महाराष्ट्र, अदर पार्ट्स ऑफ इंडिया से कि सर प्लीज सेंड अस द लिंक ऑल्सो, वी वांट टू आल्सो ज्वाइन दिस। तो सर आपका स्वागत है। मैं चाहूंगा सर आप प्लीज अपना टेक्निकल सेशन स्टार्ट करें और मेंबर्स को बताएं सर कोड ऑफ एथिक्स के बारे में।
थैंक यू सो मच Mr. Bharat. Am I audible to all the people?
Yes sir.
This is perhaps the first time I am getting an opportunity to talk to the participants of you both Hisar and Sonipat branches. The topic today is Code of Ethics. This has never been a topic of great importance, perhaps before 2020. And it has been the effort of the Institute to bring this topic to the front because there has been an increased perception that the members in practice in particular have to be educated more on the importance of the subject of ethics. As you all are aware, Code of Ethics revised version has been effective from April 2020. And the voluminous text must be accessible to all the people. So I am not going to talk on the theory mostly. Rather, my effort is to discuss with you some practical aspects which I have experienced in my career as a person who assisted chartered accountants who have perhaps not taken proper care about ethical practice or were unlucky to be caught on the wrong foot, I would say. Ethics is not something that can be defined in one or two words or in a sentence. Our Code of Ethics text does not define what is ethics. Ethics is basically it has to come from within you. Naitikta जिसको हम हिंदी में कहते हैं, that enables humanity to live in a society that shows virtues. So it's not about the profession alone. But as time progresses, what happens with the society is a lot of cutting off corners happen in the pursuit of survival of people. So every young generation tries to improve upon the previous generation. Technology helps them. New ideas come up. Sometimes we cross the limits. In other words, the principles that are the foundations of human life, society, sometimes get tweaked, compromised. That has happened with the society as a large, not just with the profession of chartered accountancy or medical profession for that matter. So in the early days, our profession did not have any code of ethics. Then after 20 years, a code of ethics came into place, but it was a compact, small one with the larger principles. Now in 2019, the international body as well as the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India felt the need of bringing a bigger text. When it's very difficult to make people understand certain things, what people try is to speak and write more and more about that. So the more explanations come up, the bigger the text it becomes. That is what is the effect of a larger volume. However, the principles are largely the same. Our profession is built on the fundamental 5 principles: integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, professional behavior, and confidentiality. These are the 5 fundamental principles of our profession. What the Code of Ethics text says is, this code is providing a framework to help members identify and assess and also to address whether there are any risk that they are facing to comply with the fundamental principles of the profession. क्या आपकी कार्यकारिणी में हमारी प्रोफेशन की जो नींव है, 5 फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल्स है, जिसको पालन करने में आपको कोई असुरक्षा महसूस हो रहा है तो उसको पहचानिए और उस रिस्क एक एक्सेप्टेबल लेवल का अगर नहीं है, if the risk is not within the acceptable limit, then you don't take up the job. You first try to reduce the risk to the acceptable level. If you cannot, then don't take up the job. Now, this theoretical principle to some would like very simple, but for many, this doesn't gel. What is the meaning of all this? To understand this, we need to understand our profession first. What kind of stake is involved with our profession? Public, general public trust us as competent people who are undertaking the attestation work and giving an opinion to the public at large that yes, the certificate or the financial statement that I have certified or attested is believable to you. It is believable for you. You can rely upon this document. What is at stake is public trust. The government authorities rely upon our opinions to form views about organizations, entities, about their compliance, about their business model, about the truthfulness of their financial statements and their disclosures. So when we fail, it affects the economy first, government, public, country. So the responsibility upon us is very high, very huge. However, perhaps all of the members of the profession, in the profession, do not understand the importance of it. Therefore, errors and omissions happen. Going by the statistics, in a year, 600 to 700 complaints reach at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India against chartered accountants, in which allegations are against professional misconduct. Now, we are aware about our number of members, maybe 3 lakh people now. Now, 700 may not be a big number, but every year that number is there, more or less. One member can spoil the profession. The image of the profession gets tarnished. The moment a chartered accountant gets involved in anything inappropriate, wrong, a newspaper or a media channel identifies the person first as a CA. That is because of the importance of profession. So this is the relevance of the ethics here. Now, not only that we have to be careful about our profession, even our personal life. As chartered accountants, we are kept at a higher pedestal of the society. So therefore, as a regulator, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India does not want the profession to be, the dignity of the profession to be lowered in the eyes of others. So they become very strict. So that strictness is appearing in the form of a detailed text. That is the new version of Code of Ethics. As I said, the fundamental principles remain very same. If you look at those fundamental principles, the first one, integrity, refers to what? Straightforward approach. Honesty in all your professional and business relationships. Now, this is known to all. I don't think any chartered accountant does something intentionally to compromise with the integrity. We live in a society where practical life throws up a number of challenges. The new generation of chartered accountants particularly sometimes get confused where to draw the line, whether to protect the interest of the client or to protect the interest of the authorities, and what about my interest? A lot of confusion. And we are uniquely positioned as a profession. It's a private sector profession. It does not get any support from the authorities. At the same time, our job is public service. we need to get paid by our client, whom against we are supposed to give an opinion if situation arises so. So it throws up a complicated situation. Then how do we handle that? Is it possible to behave very straightforward, honest in your professional and business relationship? Of course, yes. This revised version of Code of Ethics is necessitated with the changed times. We have, as students, seen the respect our bosses from whom we did our articleship used to get from our clients. There used to be no talk of chartered accountant facilitating anything inappropriate in the law. Lessons to be given was, you don't know the law. I know the law. I know the consequences if you don't follow the law. Do not look forward to the temporary benefit you have. The benefit of long term must be seen. It may be bitter now, but in long term it is good. You would sustain well. These used to be the lessons. Anybody and everybody is scared when someone warns him, look, this is the consequence. If nobody is there to warn them, then they would take their ways. If your client dares to challenge you, tell him, brother, come and sit with me, let us have a discussion. If you are able to impress upon him and win over him, then you are a successful professional. If he chooses to go his way, keep yourself away. We know that he may have his short-term practical goals. Let him do it. Do not get involved into them. So the approach of integrity is this. Now, any number of reams of papers can be written about this. But essence is this. If you keep this in mind, then you are lowering risk of yours. Objectivity, not to compromise on professional or business judgments because of bias or conflict of interest or undue influence of others. When I said the 5 principles, I did not use the word independence anywhere. But all of us know that independence is the biggest word that plays in the mind of an auditor or a chartered accountant as an attester. But that independence is derived from this fundamental principle, objectivity. Because it talks about conflict of interest. You should not have any conflict of interest. The Code of Ethics discusses different threats. जैसे मैंने कहा कि कोड में ये बात लिखा हुआ है कि हमारे ये फ्रेमवर्क के अंदर अगर आपका कोई थ्रेट्स नजर आ रहा है कि इस फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल के साथ कॉम्प्रोमाइज होने की, तो उस थ्रेट्स को पहचानें। तो किस किस तरह का थ्रेट्स? थ्रेट ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस। आर यू एसोसिएटेड विद द फैमिली or any close relationship? Do you have any financial interest? Have you done any advocacy for the same client for whom you are going to attest? Advocacy threat. Are you doing the attestation or audit of the thing that you have made or you have been part of it? Self-review threat. So self-interest threat, self-review threat, advocacy threat, familiarity threat, all these threats are possible when you deal with a client. The code prescribes that if the threat cannot be lowered, then do not accept the job. In other words, if bookkeeping has been assigned by the client to you because he is too small, please don't do the bookkeeping and auditing together. You might say that, sir, bookkeeping kya hai? It's tally, data entry. Vouchers are with him, bills are with him, everything is made by him. I'm just making data entry in the tally. How would it affect? I am not taking any decision. Very valid argument. But it is a risk not worth taking, because when there are prescriptions in the rule book that do not do bookkeeping, then you cannot do bookkeeping. Regardless of the fact that the kind of bookkeeping that you may be doing may not be affecting the objectivity fundamental principle. कहने का तात्पर्य यह है, कई कई चीजें ऐसे हैं जो कि आपको लगता है कि यार इससे क्या मेरा फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल के साथ कॉम्प्रोमाइज होगा, मैंने क्या कर दिया। पर अगर कानून में ये लिखा हुआ है, हमारी रेगुलेशंस में ये मत करो, तो फिर उसमें आप लॉजिक ना लगाए। Because respecting rules and regulations is the next fundamental principle. Professional behavior. Professional competence and due care and professional behavior are the other two fundamental principles. Professional competence and due care is known to all. And we have this. As chartered accountants, we have technical knowledge. The problem is not with the competence, the knowledge. Problem is the due care. There have been instances in multitudes where chartered accountants were accused of not having done their job properly. Recently, other regulators have started taking actions against chartered accountants. RBI banned a senior audit firm for 2 years. NFRA banned a very senior reputed multinational audit firm SEBI took action against certain firms. It's all because they feel that due care was not given in the job. Now, how would you substantiate that मैंने किया था ढंग से? After all, our job is to give an opinion, and giving an opinion requires judgment. Judgment means I use my skill, my competence, the facts around me, and I take my view. My judgment can be different from another chartered accountant's judgment. Imagine a situation where you have expressed an audit opinion 5 years before, and then the company went into trouble. After 5 years, somebody is alleging that the auditor was at fault. How would you substantiate that? No, I had done my job properly. It's an unfortunate situation. Imagine a bureaucrat doing his decisions, or a banker doing his decisions, and then he is answerable after 5 years. No bureaucracy is asked, made accountable. And now recently, a banker was targeted, and the whole banking system stood up. They said, what the hell is this? Who would take a decision? We are also not doing anything different. Then how is it that our profession is inviting criticism? Because we are not able to demonstrate to the authorities concerned that I have taken due care. You might have taken due care, but you have not been able to demonstrate that. Second, the way you understand an audit and the way the investigator or the authority concerned understands it is different. Honestly, I have seen opinions made by various investigating agencies with respect to audit reports made by fellow professionals. And I started respecting those people because the objectivity with which they have addressed the job. And I have realized that we become very mechanical, matter of fact, sometimes very casual in our approach. That is what the code is saying. There is a fundamental principle, professional competence and due care. And you should see that it is achieved. Your job is done meticulously. Code stops there. I'm not stopping here. I'm saying that you must have done that. But if somebody raises this question to you after some years, you must be able to demonstrate also that, yes, I did it. You need to ask yourself, do I have that competence to demonstrate after 5 years, how well did I do this job? मैंने कितना अच्छा ये काम किया था? जैसे सरकारी ऑफिसर्स अपना फाइल में डायरी में अपनी फाइल नोट्स लिखता है, हर डिसीजंस के पीछे एक फाइल नोटिंग होती है. हमें अपने आप से पूछना चाहिए कि अपनी फाइलों में ऐसे नोटिंग कहाँ है। आज डिजिटाइजेशन की जमाना है। Have we got a practice of making notes behind every decision, documenting it, and digitizing it, storing it, so that anytime anybody asks, no, this was the basis. These are the documents I have seen. Authorities may call for the documents of the records of the company. Company must have vanished. You cannot keep the truckloads of records of the company with you. Still, you are answerable. But at least you should have the records, the details of the records that you have verified, the manner in which you verified, the process of verification that you did. I'm using very loose, rudimentary language, which is presented very professionally in our audit standards, audit documentation that I'm talking about, audit evidences that I'm talking about, attestation evidences that I'm talking about. So this is another aspect which is dealt in detail in the Code of Ethics. Professional behavior is complying with relevant laws and regulations, and to avoid any conduct that the professional accountant knows or should know, which might discredit the profession. Let me clarify. Sir, ये discrediting profession के लिए नहीं है. मतलब this is not confined only to lowering the dignity of the profession. It's much larger. इस बार जो कोड ऑफ एथिक्स में आपको पता है, नो क्लार, नॉन कंप्लायंस ऑफ लॉज एंड रेगुलेशंस, एक टॉपिक काफी इंपॉर्टेंस के साथ ऊपर के आया है. Earlier, we were not giving focus to other laws and regulations that were relevant and applicable to an organization. We were focusing company है, Companies Act देख ली, audit standard, accounting standard, ठीक. Tax audit, income tax act देख लिया. No. Do we have a legal responsibility of seeing this? Is a big question. If that is the case, how long, how much do we see this? So the no-clar requirement is not that you should know about all the laws under the sun. No, it's not like that. The code says that if by exercising your competence, if you come across non-compliance of other laws and regulations, ethics demand that you do not shut eyes to it. आप उसके तरफ आंख बंद ना करें. इतना ही रिक्वायरमेंट. अब रिक्वायरमेंट करके इंस्टीट्यूट ने अपनी कोड ऑफ एथिक्स में छोड़ दिया. Now, suppose someone did an audit of a company in which more than 50% of the revenues were from the financial interest or financial assets, or more than 50% of the assets were financial assets. Then, as a chartered accountant, you are aware that this can come within the definition of an NBFC. Although it is not an NBFC, incidentally, by default, because of the composition of the asset, it became an NBFC. Now, can you shut your eyes to this? Because if it is an NBFC, according to your judgment or according to the norms laid down by the RBI, then the next clause comes, an auditor is required to report to the Reserve Bank of India directly. First, inform the directors that this has become an NBFC and you should get the registration. So those requirements come up. No, these things are additional jobs for you. You are not paid for this because you are appointed as a statutory auditor. But the law applies here. You cannot escape the obligation, liability. That is professional behavior. To comply with the relevant laws. Here comes the no clause. Suppose you have remained silent. After 4 years, if someone comes up with a finding that no, this was an NBFC 4 years back, and the question comes, why did the auditor not report about it? You cannot say that, no, this didn't occur to me. ये मेरे सामने नहीं आया था. Because here, the non-compliance is tested with respect to the application of a law. And that law gives clear-cut benchmarks. तो benchmarks पूरा होता है, तो naturally law की violation हो गया. तो ये नहीं कह सकता आप कि ये तो मेरी नजर से, ये मेरी नजर में नहीं आया. This hasn't crossed my sight. You cannot say that. So the prescription in the code that the auditor shall not remain silent about non-compliance of other laws and regulations applicable to an entity, if it comes to his knowledge, is a rider which perhaps will not give much benefit to you. You must be aware with respect to every entity you are associated with as to what are the laws and rules applicable to this organization. हर entity जिसके साथ आप जुड़े हो, उनके लिए कौन सा कानून relevant है, वो कौन कौन सी कानून की पालन नहीं कर रहा है, जानना जरूरी हो गया. So these are the inferences that are coming. Now, if you see the first part of Code of Ethics, it begins like this. It is a framework. So it is not a law, it is a framework. What is that framework? Which is facilitating you to assess or identify the risk. चलो ठीक है, आपको एक help हो रहा. Then if you continue further, it says that wherever a paragraph is prefixed with R, it's a requirement, it is compulsory for you. And sometimes you wonder what is written against that R is more of a principle, a qualitative matter, a subjective matter, not in the form of a rule. When it is not in the form of a rule, where subjectivity applies, ये करना है, नहीं करना है, conditional है, क्या है, क्या नहीं है, again it becomes judgmental. And the code accepts it. Yes, there are matters of judgment. Now the challenge is, if you have taken a judgment and somebody challenges that judgment later on, what will happen? So the bottom line is very simple. Apply your common sense. जहां नैतिक तौर पर आपको लगता है कि इस काम के साथ मुझे ऐसे करना चाहिए, it has to come from within you. It is no longer a mechanical job. our profession demands more time, more application of mind, gauging the business model, practices, and every line item of the organization, including every transaction, with thorough, deep understanding. Then only in the present times, the way this code demands us to remain as chartered accountants, it would be fulfilled only if that extra mile is traveled. The last fundamental principle that I did not say so far is confidentiality. You need to respect the confidentiality of information acquired as a result of the professional or business relationship. But that goes without saying. It doesn't require much elaboration. However, this confidentiality clause doesn't have any application if questions are raised by the institute or by any legal authorities according to the law. You know that our code has got three parts. Code of ethics has three parts. The first part is the one which is dealing with this fundamental principle, and it gives elaborate suggestions on that with respect to the laws in the land of the land. Second part deals with our ICA Act, its provision, and the schedule, including the guidelines issued by the institute from time to time. You know that the ICA Act defines what is professional misconduct. That definition is not comprehensive. It is an inclusive definition. And primarily, if any violation of the provisions of code or first schedule or second schedule provisions happen, then only professional misconduct applies. But one of the provisions is non-compliance of the guidelines issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So, Code of Ethics falls within the scope of that. There is an interesting point here. Earlier, Institute had issued one guideline and identified it as the guideline for the purpose of the schedule. मतलब ये था कि अगर उस गाइडलाइन में लिखा हुआ कोई भी पॉइंट का उल्लंघन हो रहा है तो वो प्रोफेशनल मिसकॉन्डक्ट माना जाएगा। कहने की तात्पर्य यह था कि बहुत सारी गाइडलाइंस होती है, वो सारी एप्लीकेबल नहीं है। इस गाइडलाइंस में, गाइडलाइंस dated 8th of August 2008 was the guideline. But now the things have changed. Now they have taken away the write-up. Now any and every guideline issued by the institute can be referred to by the institute and say that, have you complied with this guideline? There used to be a thinking that guidance notes were only recommendatory. And there have been expert advisory committees reports also based on that. Guidance notes are not mandatory. So balance sheets used to be made forgetting the prescriptions in the guidance note with the assumption that guidance notes are just recommendatory. But there have been instances now, these days, in the last 2-3 years, where the institute has referred to the guidance note issued by the institute during the professional misconduct cases and said this was mandatory to be followed. So these are instances of shifting the goalpost because of multiple reasons. So I have so far spoken about the fundamental points that guide us to practice in compliance of the revised code of ethics. We need to inculcate certain character within us. This is meant to be listened to by the young members of the profession. You are a professional in practice, and you are supposed to earn money based on your time deployed and the competence. A client may grow leaps and bounds with your help and advice. Don't try to grow in the same proportion, because he is taking a risk and running a business. You are not taking a risk, you are running only a profession. I have seen many young members in the pursuit of making fast money have taken shortcuts and have landed in trouble. Therefore, one point to be remembered is, remind yourself that I am a professional and I am supposed to behave like a professional. Second, the moment you see that an entity is not falling in line with what you are saying, try to secure yourself and secure your profession, not your career, secure the profession. I will give an example. A friend of mine who was auditing a big company was troubled by the manner in which they were running their activities and the kind of non-compliance and violations. He didn't know what to do. At the end, he decided, I have to let go of this company. So I am going to make a very strong report this time. Let the company go if they want to, but I am not going to leave this unpunished. He prepared detailed mails of every point that he observed as non-compliant, professionally sought replies, was not able to get them, put in the disclosures, reported. Company management was furious. They said, okay, you can do whatever you want. He was not paid, he was threatened. He said, okay, I am leaving. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. Don't worry, appoint somebody else, no problem. But I cannot do this. Now they thought of appointing somebody else. A new gentleman came. But naturally, he is supposed to communicate with the previous auditor. When the previous auditor was communicated, he said, these are the situations in which I am leaving, brother. You please be aware about it. What happened? The new auditor was appointed. He said, I'll take up the job, but I have got all input from the previous auditor. I would be charging this much, and I would give him a report like this. Now, by changing the auditor, the client did not earn anything. Yes, my friend lost his client and money. And another person who came in his place got more money and did the best job. This is for the sake of profession. The day industry, business, economy realize that to get it off, a chartered accountant is easy, but getting another chartered accountant is tough to get my job done, then things would start falling in place. Because of cutthroat competition, perhaps amongst the newer generation, neither there is a proper communication with the previous auditor, nor there is a regard for the risk that he is going to take. You must be well aware about your client. If you do not know in detail about your client, then it can invite a lot of problems. I have seen at least 4 or 5 instances where lives of chartered accountants were ruined because they wanted just some money. That too because of desperation. One guy was asked to give a certificate of turnover. And he thought, let me give a turnover certificate. Auditor was somebody else. And the turnover certificate, unfortunately, was subjected to investigation after certain years. Since it was just a turnover certificate, he did not bother to keep all records with him. When inquiries began, he did not have anything with him to substantiate on what basis he gave the certificate. When he approached the client back, sir, I need these documents. He said, who the hell are you? I gave you the money, you gave me a certificate, that's over. So temporary arrangements without getting into the details of the client. Another incident was a company from Mumbai approached an auditor in Delhi to do an audit through some other professionals. The auditor trusted, audited, gave a certificate. There was nothing wrong in the audit. Audit was perfect. The report was perfect. But later on, certain investigators stumbled upon some other things of this directors, reached at the company, and they were looking for some trace. Where are these directors? They were not traceable. And then they found a chartered accountant who was signed the balance sheet where these 2 people are the directors. Reaching from Mumbai to Delhi and asking him, where are these people? He said, I don't know. Where are these people? Then the question was, have you ever seen him? In spontaneity, he said, no, I have not seen them. By mistake. In spontaneity, he said, I have not seen them. Then the question, how did you do the audit without knowing the directors who are? He said, somebody brought the books to me and I did the audit. These are naive, thoughtless answers. What followed thereafter was imaginable to you, understandable to you. If a chartered accountant says that I have not seen the management of the company and I did the audit. Why I am saying this? I have heard that tax audits are brought by middlemen to CAs for attestation. Now, she has undertaken the job. But the point is, the person whom for you did the attestation doesn't know what did you do for him. आपने उनके लिए क्या किया उन्हें पता ही नहीं. He doesn't understand the importance of the tax audit. Tax audit is an opportunity for you to interact with your client and make him realize what is this tax audit all about. How important is this document in your life and what am I doing for you? If we miss that opportunity and save our time, what happens? We do not get the respect. Where we don't get respect, we won't be able to get anything done from the client. You can make the client fall in line to give you audit evidences, explanations, clarifications, and attempts to get confirmations. All these things are possible only when the client has some respect for you. And that respect comes when you are able to impress upon him. Making an impression to the client requires spending time with him, talking sensible things with him, and touching on those points that are very touchy for them. It requires time. That is not possible if you do the tax audit in half an hour and collecting 5,000 rupees. Now people in the hinterlands would say that what is he saying? Kya practical life kaise ho sakta hai kya? I know there are practical difficulties. But I have also seen even people in smaller towns have different styles. There are people who earn respect, make good money, and there are people who don't have respect and make no money. So attitude as a professional has to be imbibed on the strength of our code, because our code gives us a backbone. And if you have to keep that backbone upright, then you need to follow these points that I am touching. We know that in a case of attestation of a balance sheet, inventory verification is a requirement. But how many times a chartered accountant can examine the inventory physically or be present in the physical verification? These are practical matters. And particularly for trading community and all, it may be very unfeasible. But that is all right. But when you are attesting the balance sheet, is your client aware that the attestation has been done by you without he giving enough evidence about this? Allow me a 1 minute break. I think some Bharat is going here. Sorry. So what I was trying to say was, when it comes to such a small point of inventory verification, it is essential for you to share with your client that, look, there is a requirement as per the law for me to verify this stock. You have to do it and demonstrate to me. He may not do it. You may put a disclosure. Those things are subsequent to protect your interest. But if he doesn't even know there is a requirement, that is what is expected from practically following this code of ethics. You may continue to do a disclosure that I have not physically verified it. You may put a disclaimer. But the client must know that he is at fault, so that the scope of improvement takes place. When it comes to writing of stocks and all, I remember one story. One fellow friend of mine who had to attest a financial statement that had a significant amount of stock write-off. Promptly, he disclosed that in the tax audit report. But when it came to the statutory audit report, he did not make any disclosure, although the amount was significant. To his misfortune, some investigators found later that the financial statements did not have any remark or disclosure about a significant amount of stock write-off. Then, when the matter went to the institute would see from the angle of accounting standards. So they asked the question, was it not an exceptional item? Yes. Were you not supposed to disclose that as an exceptional item? Yes. Did you do it? No. Are you guilty or not? Seems so. So the point is, sometimes things that may appear very trivial for us. You might think that stock was written off. Naturally, it affects the P&L account. The profit is corrected for that. Balance sheet is correct because there was no stock, so naturally the balance sheet is correct. So what is the problem? But when you are subjected to judgment by others, always remember they may have a different viewpoint. They did not examine the work of the chartered accountant concerned from the narrow angle कि बैलेंस शीट सही था या P&L सही था. दोनों सही थे. प्रॉफिट लॉस अकाउंट में सही प्रॉफिट था, बैलेंस शीट में सही अमाउंट ऑफ एसेट्स एंड लायबिलिटीज थे. The question they asked was, whether did you make the disclosure in accordance with accounting standards? Then that was a point. This is what is professional competence. I remember another story. An organization was keeping two sets of, they had multiple movements of stocks. So for the purpose of accounting, they maintained a consolidated stock record where opening stock, productions, then movements, closing stock. With that, the balance sheets were made, balance sheets were accurate, there was no issues. There were certain investigations later on in the organization. And some discrepancies were observed with the stocks. And then it was found that the stock used to move from one location to the other location, to the third location, to the fourth location for different processes and used to come back. And the organization was not keeping proper stock record location-wise. Investigating officers summoned the auditor and asked him, why have you given the Caro observation that inventory records are proper when they did not have the location-wise stock records? The fact of the matter is that they had location-wise stock and movements were all known to him. It's not that he did not know all these things, but he just thought opening stock is there, production is there, movement is there, closing stock is there. So the basic requirement of the inventory records are fulfilled here. Then why at all we should bother about that? If I consider the location-wise stock records, then I may have to give a negative view here. So let me give a positive view. This is an example of a normal approach of a chartered account. Let us give a cleaner picture if possible. That positive approach is not harmful. I would not say don't do that. But you should be mindful of the risk you are taking. This is what is professional competence. I'm just giving some small example to make you understand that what is meant by that. So to achieve professional competence, you should first make your client realize that what are the obligations he has. If we don't communicate with them, they don't realize it. This code of ethics, and I would say the last 3-4 years, multiple laws that came into being, be it GST or Amended Companies Act or whatever, Money Laundering Act and things like that. All these legislations gave us professionals an opportunity to re-educate the clients, the need of refining themselves in the maintenance of records and maintenance of transparency. Most of us are aware that the banking sector is still not out of woods. And it has been more than 10 years, the banking sector has been in problem because of the huge amount of non-performing advances. The reason for the non-performing advances were primarily the economic slump of the country. People who borrowed money, imagining or calculating that, okay, we would make money, we would do this business or that business well, did not succeed because of multiple failures in the country. When the money got stuck, naturally, other steps followed. The bankers, to protect them, started putting blame on the borrower and their auditors. Many chartered accountants are facing investigation by CBI and Economic Crimes Wing and other people. And they are questioned for the balance sheet they attested 5 years, 6 years, 7 years before. And the problem they are facing is that they do not have appropriate working records. This is professional competence. You need to be far-sighted about the consequences of clients' action and be guarded. And on the aspect of threats, try to keep the distance that much where someone would not raise fingers on your independence. There have been some instances where, chartered accountants were as auditors were put behind bars with the allegation that they were hand in glove with the company in diversification of siphoning away of funds and things like that. You know, the fact is, management decided money matters. Their boards decided how to take the money away to this or that. Appropriate resolutions had been passed. Documentation wise, there have not been much of a problem. So for an auditor who attested a balance sheet, there was no occasion for him to say that, look, this is something that is not to have been done. Because after all, ICDs are allowed by the company law. So if somebody takes the money away out of ICDs, how is it qualifiable? Then an investigator goes into other things and sees that the auditor's office is given as address for one or two companies of the client. Auditor's distant relative is made as director in one or two companies of the client. I'm just giving example. These are conflicts of interest. Now, when the client wanted to create a company for one or other purpose, a small company, maybe a shell company or investment company, must have thought of, asking his help for a company, Banade. And the chartered accountant, without thinking, okay, let me make a company. Who would be my directors? Acha chalo usko bana do. Where would be the office? Chalo mera office bana do. These kind of naive steps will have long-standing implications. These are thoughtless actions. Because when a company goes into trouble, aajkal, the courts appoint forensic auditors. And the forensic auditors would examine and they get into all these nitty-gritties. And they have to score the points. They would be our professional police, no doubt. But they would find out. They said, look, all these people are one and the same. Now, point is, there is no evidence suggesting that on the financial dealings, the auditor has done anything. But the only point that may be coming is that, oh, this auditor is making a lot of money from the client. Yes, he's doing the job and he's making money. And look at the kind of relationship. Office shared, people shared. So there is familiarity thread. So this is what is the intent of the code. You should not cross the line. Another point is, when there would be questions about your professional approach, don't be naive in your answer. If you are giving answers very naive, then it would bite you back. I'll give an example. A fellow member attested a document based on certain assurances from the company. Then there was some backtracking and complaints and disputes, and then questioning on the chartered accountant, how do you sign this? And in his anxiety to impress upon the officers that, sir, I am very innocent, I have no role to play in this, he talked bad about them first. Then they said they have fought in between and they did it. It was their decision. I did not do anything. At the same time, if I have done something wrong, please pardon me. Man, this last line is ditch. What is this? If I have done something wrong, please pardon me. Is anybody going to pardon you? Do not be apologetic when it is not required. You must satisfy the queries of those raising eyebrows on your works and say, look, these are the things that happen, and I did this way. They are backtracking, I am not. So this is what is the objectivity part. Very focused on what you have done. You must elaborate on what your job was, not go here and there. Because these kind of thoughtless answers to authorities can invite big consequences. When it comes to NOCLAR, let me make a clarification to you. Although I told you that non-compliance of other laws and regulations is a very serious thing now, you should be mindful that SA 250 talks about reporting on non-compliance of law that have got a material misstatement impact. In other words, अगर आपको लगता है कि ये लॉ की नॉन कंप्लायंस से कोई मटेरियल मिसस्टेटमेंट नहीं होना है, तो जिसके बारे में SA 250 के अंतर्गत आपको रिपोर्ट करने की आवश्यकता नहीं थी। पर अब कोड ऑफ एथिक्स में ये रिक्वायरमेंट है और आपको लगता भी है कि ये इंपॉर्टेंट है यार, कल कोई पूछेगा तो मैं चुप रहा, ये दिक्कत ना हो, तो डालना भी चाहिए। Then of course it would not be a matter of qualifying point. You can put it as other matter in the audit report if at all you feel it is appropriate. But don't mix up or confuse the SA 250 requirement with the NOCLAR requirement in the code of ethics. I have already explained that other regulators are very much on the, they have increased their what we call vigilance on the auditor's role. It's an unfortunate situation for us, but this is going to be continuing now. So even if it is a small work, an attestation or a certification, you have to be very, very careful that this can raise a question tomorrow. Particularly, certificates that have been asked by bankers these days. Now, I have seen that when at the time of sanctioning of loans and all, bankers ask for a lot of certificates from chartered accountants. Some are related to financial. Some are not. For example, they want a certificate that there are no statutory liabilities. Some ask for certificate, director's net worth certificate. Now, these are certificates that cannot be easily given. You know that how can a chartered accountant give that no statutory liability? He can only talk about what is in front of him. If the management has not been forthright in giving the information about the legal notices he received or the actions initiated by other authorities, for that matter, even related parties, chartered accountant cannot give a clean slate that, okay, fine, there are, this is like this. No. But I am informed by many of my colleagues that professional friends are not able to refuse this because the clients suffer. I have a different view, brother. Clients don't suffer if you stand with them. You don't stand with them for wrong requirement of the bank. You can assertively say that, look, this certificate cannot be issued by a CA. This has to be given by the management of the company. I'm not bluffing here because I have done in my life. I have stood very firmly against the bank and in favor of my client. At the same time, holding my ground that I would not issue this certificate. So, certificate director's net worth. In a net worth for a director has to be based on market value of the asset. Now, market value of the asset is not something that you can certify. Therefore, and also directors are not subject to audit by you. And the guidance note on certification says that you cannot give net worth unless the balance sheet is audited. If you remember the guidance note on certification 2016 revised. So how can you give a certificate? But I have seen people giving certificates. And then they invite problem for themselves. Some business models, you have to be very careful. Now, recently somebody asked me, sir, I am helping a client on cryptocurrency business. I said, we got it. We don't know what is going to happen when. So you have to be very careful with respect to every transaction. There are, when the GST was introduced by 2018, when the GST authority started investigating on the input claims and the false input claims, etc., they stumbled upon so many businesses where, the purchase and sales are there, but stocks are not there, or there are no go downs for holding the stock, etc. And these things became very big news items in the media. But that is not to be taken on face value, because there are so many business models where, the stocks are not held physically by the dealers and distributors. I remember the story of a chartered accountant who had to face this investigation, and he was asked this question: where is the stock? Where do you verify it? He said, there are no stocks in the books of concern. It is all purchased and sold. That's it. How is it possible? Then he said, look, this is the business model. Then the next question is, where is it written in your balance sheet? He said, that is not written, sir. That is professional due care. Because when you know that he is running a business model which is unconventional, when he has a business that does not physically deal in stock, but the goods are transported from the seller to the buyer directly, and he is only an intermediary, then that is not a conventional business model. And when it is not a conventional business model, you are required to disclose in the notes account about that non-conventional business model, so that nobody raises a question. This is what is professional due care. So code gives a big, opportunity for us to relook the way we are approaching our assignment. There are organizations that are, round tripping the turnovers, particularly in jewelry business. Because their peculiar business model is that they buy old gold, then they sell it to the other agencies for the purpose of melting and refining and things like that. Then they buy back and then they sell. Same stock buys and gets purchased and sold multiple occasions. What is the effect of it? You have purchase bills, you have sales bills, everything is there, stock coming, going. But if you see the essence of it, it is round tripping. With this turnover, he goes to a banker and says, sir, I have got 200 crore turnover. 50 crores turnover did 4 times. And the banker believes that, and he gives loans. After some years, when it becomes NPA, and banker examines and finds that, why, my God, this turnover was fake, bogus, And the complaint is that the chartered accountant attested bogus balance sheet. So the point what I'm trying to say is, brothers, the way we look at the works need deeper changes. Recently, lot of investigations happened on chartered accountants because we have not been careful while doing the attestation work. I am focusing more on attestation, but that doesn't mean that attestation is the only thing. Even in non-attestation work, there have been criticism. I've seen people doing balance sheets attestation without auditing, without any comment. Unaudited accounts are attested. CMA data is certified. Balance sheets are printed on the letterhead of the chartered accountant. Attestation is done without any dates. The registered office of the company is not on the letterhead. Some other address is written, balance sheet is made, signed. All these are points that can invite problems. I am just giving examples after examples just to say that Code of Ethics only gives 5 principles. Those 5 principles won't make you understand anything. These are 5 principles, PK, principles there. But what is behind it? The need for us to be more independent, with more integrity, more professional, more knowledge, and more communicative and independent. That is the objective of it. With the change times, expectation gap is more, because earlier we used to say we were watchdogs. Now we have a confusion whether we are watchdogs or what, or bloodhounds or what not. At least the new company law has made a bigger responsibility of reporting on fraud direct to the authorities. Now, whether we have enough competence to detect frauds or not, I don't know. But if a fraud comes up subsequently, and if it was a case where an auditor failed to report it, take it, he is in trouble. So the requirements of the law have increased significantly, but we have not perhaps increased our capacity and competence accordingly. Therefore, there is a gap between the expectation of the concerned, whether it is public or authorities, regulators, and that of ours. We have first schedule and second schedule in the Institute IT Act that define the various kinds of professional misconduct. In the first schedule, we have one clause under Part 1, Clause 6. For first schedule, Part 1, Clause 6. That is soliciting clients or professional work, either directly or indirectly. It is all about advertisements and personal communication. If you go through the Code of Ethics part 3, there are several case laws where professionals have been held guilty for professional misconduct for breaching this clause. Similarly, on the independence part, clause 11 says that you should not engage into any other business without the approval of the council. And once the council gives the approval, that means you are a part-time practitioner. But there have been several instances where members get into business. There are exceptions to that. Even then, there is permission required. There are some general permissions, like for example, part-time tutor, etc., or as an author, harmless jobs. That is in the circular. I am not going to the details of it. Guidelines have been given. But I am focusing on the basic restriction. Getting into the business, other businesses without the permission of the council. Similarly, there is one clause in part 1 where you attest financial statements where your partner or a relative has substantial stake. It directly touches independence. There is a similar one in the Companies Act also, since the new Companies Act came into being 2013 onwards, naturally, you cannot, it's a disqualification. Even in a guidelines of 8th August 2008 also, there is a restriction that you cannot attest the financial statements where your relatives have any stake. The definition of relatives is same as of the Companies Act. So these restrictions are in place, but still people breach this. Now, these restrictions must be learned with reference to new code. Then only you will understand the importance of the new code. In the restrictions, it says that if you have substantial stake, 1. Second, relatives. And the relatives definition is what? Linear, ascending or descending. 2 generations. That's it. In other words, a cousin is not a relative for the purpose of the guidelines. However, the new code, when it described the familiarity threat, it has not defined a relative. And recently, I found a case where a chartered accountant is held guilty on breaching familiarity threat and not taking safeguard for doing the audit of a trust where his cousin was a trustee. I was shocked by that. And for that, the disciplinary authorities did not dwell on the guidelines or the definition of relatives. What they said was this: he should have been careful to understand that after all it is his cousin and her husband who were the trustees, and they were in a position to influence him as an auditor, and when there was a possible conflict of interest, he should have desisted from taking up the job. So what I am saying is,
Even the relatives definition now has been expanded without touching the relative definition. This is a case in appeal, of course. So what I'm saying is that the scope of the definitions have been expanded with the times, and the new code has given a lot of leg room for these kind of interpretation. Second schedule of the IC Act has got severe clauses. Part 1, second schedule, clauses 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 5, non-disclosure of material facts known to the chartered accountant, auditor, in the financial statements with which he is associated. मतलब बैलेंस शीट जिसके साथ वो एसोसिएटेड है उस पे कुछ मटेरियल फैक्ट्स लिखना चाहिए था इनकी व्यू में. Now, disclosure of something in the balance sheet is not the job of an auditor, but it is his responsibility to impress upon the management to make disclosures of material things if he thinks that they are relevant for the users of financial statements to understand it properly. Now, this judgment is an auditor. Therefore, if the company fails to disclose something in the balance sheet, then on that point, the auditor can be held responsible under clause 5. It's only about disclosure I am talking about, not material misstatement. And if there is a material misstatement, clause 6 applies. And if it is not exercising due diligence, clause 7 applies. And if it is not collecting sufficient information, audit information, in other words, audit evidences. Now, coming to audit evidences, what all things are you supposed to keep with you? Thankfully, digitized auditing systems nowadays followed by members would give enough room for resolving this problem. Earlier, collecting audit evidences in big volumes and saving them was a challenge because of the physical handling of it. Now, those times are over. Therefore, I would say we are in the good times for this particular complaint. Please do not compromise on collecting audit evidences. Balance confirmations from third parties, ensure that mails are sent to your client and copies are collected by you of those mails, and audit balance confirmations are received by you directly. Physical verification of inventory is done. Physical verification sheets are collected, digitized, scanned, copied, and kept with you. Management representative letters are collected on each and every audit query and collected and in time and kept. Because a document that is collected in digital form, which has got that digital footprint of the date of creation and all, is a solid evidence for you to substantiate that I had collected this then. Emails would be giving a good trail to you. If this is properly done, then the application of clause 8 of second schedule, which imposes huge penalty, you know that. If a person is held guilty for professional misconduct under any of the clauses under second schedule, The punishment can be anything, including permanent removal from membership. Why to talk of permanent removal from membership? If a person is removed for 1 day, even then his career is ruined, because it's a fresh beginning for him. But of late, unfortunately, institute has been very harsh. I had to beg before the appellate authorities upon seeing removal of a member for 2 years, just for giving a turnover certificate which was false. And the fact is that turnover certificate was not used by anybody. It was a certificate issued by him, but it was not used by anybody. The point is, public injury or impact on public interest is no longer the criterion. Under Code of Ethics, the introductory part itself says nothing should be done that would discredit the profession. That is highlighted these days. So collecting audit information in compliance of SA 500 or SA 520, 550, or I'm forgetting the number, the independent balance confirmations, is very essential to escape from application of schedule, second schedule clause 8 under part 1. And clause 9 is violating the accepted audit prescription, all requirements, which means all the audit standards, all the guidance notes in one clause. And there is another clause, clause 1 under part 2 of second schedule, non-compliance of any of the guidelines issued by the institute, which means all prescriptions of the institutes have become, in a manner of speaking, mandatory for you now. This is the change that we see in the context of the new Code of Ethics. When you take up the jobs, please ensure that the appointment related documents are complete. Because you don't know at what point of time who is going to question the validity of your appointment. Clause 8 and clause 9 of part 1 of first schedule. Clause 8 says, if you accept an appointment as an auditor without communicating with the previous auditor, it's an offense. And clause 9 says, if you accept an audit appointment without ensuring compliance of the relevant law, although it is still written in section 225, in the context of the new company law, naturally that is applicable, because that clarification is given in the code. Here the change is what? Earlier, if you see the old Code of Ethics, one would get a sense that management shall not appoint auditors of their choice by sidelining the previous auditor, although management have the right to appoint auditors. Therefore, an auditor who is outgoing, either by removal or by completion of term should be communicated by the old one to know what exactly are the ground realities and to see that he is paid for the work he has done. And that code clarifies that there is no restriction for the management to appoint a new auditor. It also says that the audit, this act of the verification by the incumbent chartered accountant to see the completeness of the appointment related documents, resolution, etc. in the case of a company, is to ensure that no shareholders or previous auditors raise any dispute later. Now, if you see the latest development, when the companies go in trouble because of their business situation, directors start quarreling. One set of directors would start filing complaint against the other one, and an auditor would be dragged into it. And the director who is responsible for appointment of the auditor is saying that, oh no, this auditor was appointed without my consent. And unfortunately, institute is entertaining even that complaint. Come on. The objective of the regulation was not to allow fighting directors to abuse this platform to create evidences for them. Now, two sets of directors are fighting each other and they make the documents disappear. And the poor auditor who was appointed with the signature of one director has to fend for himself. This is the situation. This is a new trend. Because now things are looked at from a very straight line angle. Have you ensured a compliance of law, which is the requirement of the code, fundamental principles? Nobody is seeing the other factors. That there is an indoor management theory, that I am supposed to believe what the others say, directors say, nothing. Similarly, when it comes to the communication with the previous auditor, please ensure that you properly communicate with them and their whatever dues are there, it's clear. So friends, I have spoken at length on a lot of aspects that cross my mind. Please ensure that the appointment letters, the engagement letter, MRs, even the terms of fees are well documented and no ambiguity is there, so that always be prepared to face the investigators. My point is this: investigators are everywhere these days. And a genuine business decision failure is not seen as something, as an error of judgment. Everything is seen from a from the angle of a fraud or something mischievous, you know. That's unfortunate. But when the atmosphere is like that, we need to evolve with that, you know. So what I have to tell you guys is that times are changing fast. Expectations from chartered accountants are very high. Professionals are yet to rise up to occasion, but in the interest of each one's life, and also in the interest of the profession at large, the spirit of the code of ethics must be upheld, and you must see that there are no compromises in personal as well as professional life. That's all I have. Anything else? Where is Mr. Saresh? I think I have spoken enough. I am tired also now. If you have any questions, you may please ask the question.
Any questions? Please, you may ask. Any questions? You may write in the chat box, or you can directly ask from the sir. I have changed the settings.
We have another 6 minutes time, 5 minutes time. I have deliberately stopped 5 minutes before so that I would give an opportunity to others to, if at all they have any questions. Anyways, if there are no questions, a few more things that you have to remember. Violation of code of ethics would naturally invite disciplinary actions from the institute. However, it's a matter that has to be handled very carefully, and the process of adjudication and the process of responding to the institute should be done with a frame of legal bent. And people generally assume that, okay, fine, I'm a chartered accountant, I can do it, and I'll be able to satisfy them. But the angle from which the institute would be looking at matters are always, very technical and very, very, I would say, critical to see the role of the professional. Therefore, you should not be, casual in in your approach when you are handling those issues.
Okay, over to Rajdeep ji.
थैंक यू सर। आज सीवी साजन जी ने हमें कोड ऑफ एथिक्स के बारे में बहुत ही अच्छे से ज्ञान दिया, और मैं देख रहा था कंटिन्यू 200+ मेंबर हमारे वेबिनार को ज्वाइन किए हुए थे। सर, आपका हमें टाइम देने के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू सो मच।
ओके, आप ढंग से गाड़ी चलाइए, अदरवाइज गड़बड़ हो जाएगा। ओके, बाय।
थैंक यू वेरी मच सर।
एक्चुअली टाइम हो रहा है,
ये लक्ष्मी तो है, आप हिमालय में बैठ करके हमारे वेबिनार सुन सकते, कोई दिक्कत नहीं। अच्छा, Saresh ji and Bharat ji for giving me the opportunity to me, and thank you for your patient hearing, all audience. Is it time for us to break now?
Thank you very much sir। आपने काफी अच्छा डेलिब्रेशन दिया, मेंबर्स को काफी अच्छा लगा होगा, नॉलेजेबल वेबिनार। Thank you very much sir। Thank you all the viewers and members who have joined this।
Okay, bye। Thank you।